If a cop tells you that you match a description while you're on your way home from work, the next few seconds matter more than almost anything else in that encounter. Not because you've done something wrong, not because you're under arrest, but because one answer can completely change how the officer views you, and most people get it wrong. Picture this. You're driving home after a long shift. The lights come on behind you. You pull over. The officer approaches your window. Then he says, "Hey, you match the description of someone we're looking for." At that moment, the officer hasn't decided exactly what happens next. He's trying to figure out one thing. Are you going to help him build reasonable suspicion against you, or are you going to force him to rely on actual evidence? That is the decision point. And there's one sentence every driver should know. We'll get to that in a moment. First, let's talk about the trap. The trap isn't usually the statement itself. They rely on you not knowing your rights. This channel makes sure you do. Subscribe and stay informed. And if you believe more people need to see this, share it and let me know your thoughts in the comments. It's what comes after. The officer says you match the description of someone we're looking for. Then he follows with questions. Where are you coming from tonight? What have you been doing tonight? Can I ask why you're in this area? Do you mind stepping out for a minute? Most people immediately start talking because they want to prove they're innocent. They think cooperation automatically clears things up. So they say things like, "I just got off work. I stopped at a convenience store. I was at my friend's house for a few minutes. Then I headed home." "What convenience store?" "The one over on Main Street." "What time were you there?" "I don't know, maybe around 7. "You said you got off work at 7. Now the conversation is expanding. More questions, more details, more opportunities for confusion. Notice something important. The officer didn't catch the driver doing anything illegal. The driver simply volunteered information that opened additional lines of questioning. Now, let's look at the better response. "Officer, you match the description of someone we're looking for. Where are you coming from tonight?" Driver, "Am I being detained or am I free to leave?" That's it. Say it again. Am I being detained or am I free to leave? That is the phrase. Short, simple, easy to remember. And most importantly, it forces clarity. The officer now has to make a choice. If you're free to leave, the encounter may end. If you're being detained, the officer must rely on the legal justification for that detention. Notice what the phrase does not do. It doesn't argue, it doesn't accuse, it doesn't challenge authority. It simply asks for the status of the encounter. And that's why it's effective. Let's repeat it. Am I being detained or am I free to leave? Now, what happens next? Many officers will continue asking questions. That's normal. You might hear, "Why don't you just answer my question?" Or, "If you've got nothing to hide, why not cooperate?" Or, "We're just trying to figure things out." Again, stay focused on the decision point. The goal is not to win an argument. The goal is to determine whether you're being legally detained. You can calmly respond, "Am I being detained or am I free to leave?" Notice you're not refusing, you're not dedating, you're simply returning to the central issue. Sometimes officers will say, "You're not under arrest." That doesn't necessarily answer the question. Being detained and being arrested are different things, so you can calmly repeat, "Am I being detained or am I free to leave?" No anger, no sarcasm, no lectures, just the question. The reason this works is simple. The Constitution generally protects people from unreasonable seizures. A detention requires legal justification. A voluntary conversation does not. The key is knowing which one you're participating in. Courts have repeatedly examined the difference between consensual encounters and detentions, and that distinction often becomes important later. But you don't need a law degree to use this principle. You only need to identify the decision point. The moment the officer begins seeking information because you allegedly match a description, that's when you ask, "Am I being detained or am I free to leave?" Let's review. The trap is believing that talking your way out of suspicion always helps. The officer's objective is gathering information. The decision point occurs the moment questioning begins after you're told you match a description. The wrong response is launching into explanations and timelines. The better response is asking one simple question: Am I being detained or am I free to leave? That question forces clarity. It tells you what kind of encounter you're actually in, and it prevents you from accidentally turning a brief contact into an extended investigation. Because in police encounters, the biggest mistake often isn't what people say. It's not recognizing the exact moment when saying more starts working against them. The smartest drivers aren't the ones who talk the most. They're the ones who recognize the decision point before the officer does.